I found a bra.
I didn't know that Firewatch even existed until 2 days before it came out, at which point the onslaught of articles regarding it convinced me to give it a fair try. For those unfamiliar, Firewatch is a story-driven first-person, for lack of a better term, walking simulator that was developed by indie dev Campo Santo. While I enjoyed the luscious visuals and humanized relationship between the two main characters, performance hiccups, a woefully short playtime, and narrative missteps left me feeling extremely disappointed after the credits rolled. Firewatch starts with a 5 or so minute long text intro that provides basic setup for what ensues. The intro serves its purpose, however I have to mention that intro was just not that great at all. It tries so hard to tug on your heartstrings without doing anything whatsoever to earn that right. It doesn't help that the whole time I was uncontrollably reminded of Soma, a game that, as odd as it might seem, bears a few notable similarities to Firewatch. In this case, it's the prologue sequence. But I feel Soma did so much more and managed to do so in less time. Anyway, just look at it. I hope it speaks for itself. You can decide.
One answer is I'm going to teach you. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the screen.
Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease that destroys memory and other important mental functions. It's the most common cause of dementia, a group of brain disorders that results in the loss of intellectual and social skills. These changes are severe enough to interfere with day-to-day life. No cure exists, but medications and management strategies may temporarily improve symptoms. Most cases are seen at age 60 and over, but in rare cases it can occur earlier.
Wanting an understandable respite from what has transpired, Henry takes the job of fire lookout in the far-removed wilderness of the Shoshone National Park. Upon arriving to his watchtower, Henry is immediately greeted through a walkie-talkie by his supervisor, whose name is Delilah. Almost all of Firewatch's exposition is delivered in this way. Delilah is the only person we really talk to in this game, but we're not physically with her. It's an interesting way to portray an AOL Messenger relationship without actually portraying an AOL Messenger relationship. In fact, Firewatch is an incredibly isolating experience, and you get the impression that the walkie-talkie communication is the only thing keeping these two people from slipping into a cabin fever madness. The voice acting by both Henry and Delilah was quite good, and the writing, while not necessarily noteworthy, was realistic and fitting for the context of Firewatch. That context being dialogue exchanges between two strangers as they get to know each other better. It's well done, and it's definitely one of the highlights of Firewatch. I'm not going to get too specific about what happens story-wise, as I would risk spoiling the game for you, but there's a somewhat shocking revelation that occurs and flips the game 180 on its head. Firewatch can go from being a relaxing experience to one of utter fear and paranoia. So I loved the story, right? Well, I was expecting to, but just as Firewatch started to get interesting, it fucking ends, and badly at that. The ending is pathetic. It takes all of the tension and potential that it spent so much time crafting and just throws it to the wayside. Worst yet, the ending itself is only capable of being called an ending because there's no more game left to play after that point. It certainly doesn't resolve anything, or bring closure to the 3 hours I spent playing. Yes, you heard me right, I did say 3 hours, and yes, this game is currently asking for a cool $19.99 United States dollars on Steam. I'm going to come back to that later, because there's only so much bullshit I can handle at once. Look, I didn't want to go here. I really didn't, trust me. But I have to compare this game to Gone Home. I think Firewatch is a much better game than Gone Home, but it bears more than a passing resemblance. Mainly the short playtime, painfully disappointing endings, and red herrings that bait the player with a plotline that would have been far more interesting than what was actually there. Again, Firewatch is far better than Gone Home, but when you're reminding me of one of the worst parts of Gone Home, you're doing something wrong. After playing Firewatch and seeing the credits roll, it felt as if the time I had spent playing was completely meaningless, as if everything that had transpired in the game was inconsequential. I consider the mark of a great piece of fiction to be that it lingers in my mind long after I finished consuming it. Firewatch isn't leaving that impression on me, and in fact, the ending doesn't even allow for that to be a possibility. All of the questions that you could possibly want answered are answered in the most unsatisfying way. And at the end, Firewatch asks you to care about the two characters we never even meet and Henry's wife, who, lest we forget, was introduced in a short text-based intro that emotionally baited harder than the last episode of Angel Beats. Yes, Angel Beats, without even earning that right in the first place. So visually, Firewatch seems to fall into that low poly art style that has been pervading the indie game landscape for quite a while now. I have to give Firewatch credit where it's due though. Unlike a lot of titles that fall into that category, Firewatch isn't just flat textures. In fact, many of them are quite detailed. At times, the bucolic scenery was downright gorgeous when mixed with the stunning day-night cycle effects. When I was playing, I was reminded of Proetus, which by all accounts was a terrible game, but was interesting as an ambient experience. Either way, that's a compliment. Now, performance is not great, not good at all. The whole time I was playing, I had numerous drop frames and, in general, stuttering. The game doesn't feel smooth at all. Looking around with either a controller or a mouse and a keyboard has a tendency to be rather choppy. I played on PC, but I've read similar reports from players on PS4. Of course, this being the sort of game that it is, these performance issues aren't going to affect, say, your aim with a sniper rifle, but nonetheless, it still has the capacity to be quite bothersome. There's also a few areas in the game where I got stuck on geometry and had to reload. In addition to other areas of the game that looked kind of unfinished, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more polish on Firewatch, especially considering the rather small scale of the game world. When I called this game a, quote, walking simulator, I didn't mean it as a pejorative. Frankly, it's more of a reality. I've referenced 2 games so far, not counting the one we're not going to speak of, and those games are Soma and Proteus. And in terms of being an actual game, it falls somewhere between the two of those. It definitely has a point and objectives, unlike Proteus, but it isn't nearly as engaging to play as something like Soma or even Alien Isolation. Most of your time spent in Firewatch is traversing to a location that Delilah tells you to go to. You have a map and a compass to help you get to where you need to go, but Firewatch does a fantastic job of naturally guiding the player to where they need to be. There was only 1 or 2 instances where I truly got lost during my time playing, which is an accomplishment considering that the map is somewhat open. I haven't done this yet on my channel, maybe I should from now on, but I'm going to talk about the value prospect of Firewatch. Like I mentioned, at the time of recording this review, Firewatch is $19.99 United States dollars on Steam. Firewatch took me 3 hours to beat. From what I've gathered online, that seems to be on the lower end of playtimes. Most took more time than I did. That said, I wasn't rushing, I was playing the game at a normal pace, reading most of the notes, etc. The short playtimes wouldn't necessarily make the price tag too outrageous. That is, if it was an amazing, mind-blowing game that happened to be short. I'm afraid that's just not the case for Firewatch. What is there is decent, but by no means is it excellent or mind-blowing. Value is certainly something that should be discussed when it comes to certain titles, and I'm going to try to talk about it more from here on out when applicable. It isn't something that would too heavily affect my verdict on the game, but maybe it should. It does, without question, affect my recommendation of a game, though. You could have a 4-hour-long game that is a 10 out of 10 but costs $1,000, which would make it quite difficult to recommend. Firewatch is not by any means a good value for the price tag. So the verdict on Firewatch is a 5.5 out of 10. Firewatch is a beautiful looking game, one that features a relationship that is well portrayed, but its narrative falls short and ultimately fails to give weight to the relationship that it builds. However, those visuals, well-done voice acting, and a genuinely good plot twist are enough to elevate this game to a slightly above-average score. So we've now arrived at the ultimate question. Would I recommend Firewatch to a friend, a viewer, anyone? Probably not. My recommendation, probably not. The game has a $20 price tag, a 3-hour playtime. That makes it hard to recommend to a lot of people, specifically value-conscious gamers. If you're a value-conscious gamer, this game is definitely not for you until it becomes significantly more discounted. If you've played Firewatch, you either agree with my review, you don't agree with my review, somewhere in between, please let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game if you've played the game, and thanks for watching.